So, welcome everybody to our fourth Porch Chat of the 2020 season. We're really happy that you're here. My name is Julie Thompson. I work for the Waterloo Region Crime Prevention Council, and I am also a friend of crime prevention. We are hosting this event as part of our Keep Families Safe campaign, preventing family violence in Waterloo Region. We are part of a growing coalition of municipalities and agencies that recognized right at the beginning of the pandemic that the added stress and isolation of COVID-19 was going to increase situations of family violence, and it was going to limit people's opportunities to access help. So our campaign is to raise awareness, to let people know how to access support, and it's also to equip family, friends, and others to recognize signs of violence and how they can offer support. So for those of you who haven't participated in a Porch Chat pre-pandemic, it's quite literally what it sounds. We meet on the beautiful porch of the governor's house, and so here's a picture of the governor's house. It's also my backdrop. The governor's house is where our office is located. It's right downtown Kitchener, beside the Kitchener Public Library on Queen Street. And during a Porch Chat, there is some opportunity for people to come together, to bring their refreshments, to be introduced, and to connect with one another. And then we facilitate a topic that was a set topic chosen by a committee of community members. For our 2020 Porch Chats, all of our topics have been associated with our Keep Families Safe campaign of preventing family violence. And like so many other events around the whole world, we have taken this event online. As these 2020 Porch Chats are part of the Keep Families Safe campaign, we are recording them so that we can share the content with the wider community. We will edit them down. They won't be the complete chat part of the Porch Chat. And if you're uncomfortable with the videotaping, if you just turn off your video camera, then you won't be appearing on the video at all. We're really happy today to have with us Rod Friesen from the Mennonite Central Committee. Our topic today is being an active bystander. And being an active bystander is so relevant in these times, not only in preventing family violence, but also in addressing bullying, and specifically online bullying, which we're seeing a lot of, racism, sexism, and all the other ways that people can hurt or belittle others. I want to introduce Amy Moore. Amy, can you just say something so your screen should light up? There she is. Amy has just started with us as a Master's of Social Work student, and she's going to help facilitate this Porch Chat. We've also enlisted the help of Mariana, Dominic, Deb, and Richard to help us facilitate our breakout room. So you'll meet them, one of them in each of the breakout rooms later on. During the chat, we are asking that everybody stay on mute to minimize the background noise. If you have a question, please raise your hand, or you can write your question in the chat box and Amy or Dominic will read that out. We will have a break partway through the Porch Chat for about 5 minutes. That gives everybody a little bit of time to go and get a new refreshment or whatever you want to do. And so without further ado, I'm really pleased to hand the screen over to Rod.
All right, thank you, Julie. I'm excited to be here tonight, and thank you for taking the time to come and be a part of this Porch side chat. It's particularly relevant, I think, as Julie was saying, and you could have been doing many other things this evening, and it's a beautiful evening, and we know your time is valuable. So I hope you really both enjoy but find this time learning and conversing with others in your community valuable, and that the takeaways will be enriching for you. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about MCC. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but This year we're celebrating our 100th anniversary. So we started back in 1920, really out of a famine relief effort in Russia and in the Ukraine, where many Mennonites were stranded and starving and needed support. And over the last 100 years, MCC has developed its programs to branch out in areas of refugee support and working with uprooted vulnerable people, in peace building, in social inclusion, belonging in community, and creation care. So that's a little bit about us. And we work actually in over 50 countries around the world. The only continents that we don't work in are Antarctica and Australia. So we work everywhere else. And you can see the relief, development, and peace is our mission in the world, and here right at home for me in Kitchener-Waterloo. So the purpose of my talk today, and also hopefully all of us who are engaging in this conversation, is really about how to be an active bystander and becoming an active bystander, but also developing a sense of community values and where these values come from, how they lead to helpful or harmful behaviors, and how positive community values can lead active bystanders to, first of all, analyze a situation, determine what's going on, because sometimes that can be confusing, deciding, do you need to put on your moral courage? Is something going on that you need to stand up for? And doing what's right in the moment, or even after. Sometimes it's not right then and there. It might not be safe, or you may not feel comfortable, but it might be responding in some other way. Now, a bit of a disclaimer I'll start with is doing what's right is subjective. And when we talk about this in our active bystander program, we're really talking about doing what's right for you. So if something's making you feel uncomfortable, it might be naming that in a situation. Maybe it's in a family situation, or maybe it's in another situation in the community or at work. And so sometimes it may just be saying something simply like, does anyone else feel uncomfortable by this situation or by what was just said? And it sort of names it, and it's a very simple and profound way that we can start to become active bystanders. But that does take a little bit of competence and planning and courage to sometimes be able to do that. Now, in being an active bystander, it starts really with awareness. Awareness of our community, awareness of the power of our words and our actions. So the flow for this evening, we're going to talk a little bit about the evolution of helpful and harmful behaviors, the values and community values. We're going to engage in analyzing a bystander story. And if there's time at the end, which I think there will be, we'll do what I call, and many others know as a peace circle. So we'll have a chance to engage a little bit in a virtual circle online. It'll be a little different than a face-to-face circle, of course. Now, this picture here is a picture of our Kairos blanket exercise, and some of you may have participated in this. It's a Indigenous education experience and exercise, and participants are walked through different phases of the exercise by a narrator, and the goal of this exercise is to encounter the history of Indigenous people in Canada. This is meant to do this on both an emotional and an intellectual level. And so this, if you've ever done this, this blanket exercise, it's quite profound. And it brings people together to really think about what community is. What are the values that community brings? And how do we want to be together? So I want to read a poem just to ground us in community. And it's called Turning to One Another. It's become one of my favorite poems. And it's by an author named Margaret Wheatley, and she's a community developer. She's an academic, but most of all, I think a profound thinker and writer about community and how to develop community. And she says, there's no power greater than a community. Discovering what it cares about. Ask, what's possible, not what's wrong. And keep asking. Notice what you care about. Assume that many others share your dreams. Be brave enough to start a conversation that matters. Talk to people you know. Talk to people you'd never talk to or don't know. And be intrigued by the differences that you hear and expect to be surprised. Treasure curiosity more than certainty and invite everyone who cares to work on what's possible. And acknowledge that everyone is an expert in something. And know that creative solutions come from new connections, the new connections that you're making today. Remember, you don't fear people whose stories that you know. And real listening always brings people closer together. Trust that meaningful conversations can change the world. Rely on human goodness and stay together. So that's a poem by Margaret Wheatley, and I really like the one line especially that says, where she says, value curiosity or treasure curiosity more than certainty. And as we go into this workshop today in this porch side chat, we're going to do some breakout rooms. I'd ask you to value curiosity. Be curious about what other people are saying. Listen and learn from each other. So I'll go to the next slide, and this is a picture of two children that are part of a fundraiser for MCC, and they were raising coins and small bills for at an MCC relief sale. And these are some of the typical types of actions that many Mennonite Central Committee organizations across North America do either in the spring or the fall or the summer. It's a way of engaging with the community, and I was thinking about this as I was looking for pictures for this chat. So in this picture, you see these two children. They're all smiles. They have a sense, of how, as we grow up, even, these small gestures that we teach our children promote positive and caring values. They teach caring and sharing and community. And these are the values that many of us have grown up with and we've known. And in some ways we exhibit, but we've always known these values. They often are passed down from our parents and our grandparents and their parents and their grandparents. I want to pose and start you to think about a few questions that we're going to talk about this evening. One is, what promotes helpful behaviors in the community? So, what are those things that really are promoters? And then the next question is, what promotes harmful behaviors in the community? What are those things that may perpetuate harm? And then how do helpful or harmful behaviors begin, stop, or flourish? And we see, in the news and in our community, things happening all around us. And there's a quote from a school teacher who was involved in Training Active Bystanders, where it began down in Massachusetts, a little county outside of Boston named called Sharon, and this area of Massachusetts started Training Active Bystanders because of a tragic event that happened many years ago. What happened was there was a schoolyard fight. Everyone knew about this fight that was going to happen. The two boys went out, and one actually injured the other one, and he had a baseball bat, and so he actually the other boy ended up dying in this altercation, and no one in the town really had responded. Many people knew this was going to happen after school, and they did nothing to intervene. And so the folks that developed TAB really, out of this tragic event, began to think about, well, what promotes people from stepping in and doing something? And what stops people from harming other people, and how do we do this? And so they started researching and developing and doing this with a professor from a local university. And this teacher writes, she says, in her view, it takes about 37 seconds, and that's not a scientific quote, but that's just her quote, for an active bystander on average to analyze, intervene, and consider how to respond to a harm-doing situation. Consider how long that is for the target to stand there. and how much harm the harm doer can do in that time. And also consider how much time that is for a active bystander to respond. So it's not a lot of time. But sometimes, you know, the quickest things that we can do as an active bystander are the things that can easily diffuse situations. And many times it's short, thoughtful, meaningful activities and actions and conversations that we can have, like, what's going on here? This makes me feel uncomfortable. Does anyone else see what's going on? And, you know, recruiting other allies, and we'll get a little bit further into this as we go on, that can do profound disruption in situations of harm doing. And we all have this in us, and often we all do this as a natural part of living in community. Now, active bystanders as well can help the community self-regulate itself. And this is kind of cool because when you think about it, the community value or standard that we set, it has a ripple effect, like a pebble in a pond. It moves across the community. Think of an active bystander in a place that many years ago that may have made a difference in the country, say of Rwanda. One of our active bystanders, his name is Jean. He has come here as a refugee, and he trains this active bystander program that we have, and I'll talk to you about at the end. And he says that had the country of Rwanda, his country, had more active bystanders and active bystander training, that it's likely that the genocide would not have occurred. And coming from somebody who's lived through the genocide, that's a very powerful statement about the evolution of helpful and harmful behaviors. He said actively training their citizens to respond to harm doing and promoting positive behaviors would have gone a long way. And every group, every neighborhood, every community has some sort of set of values, or lives by a set of community values. And some of these values are very visible, and some of these values are very much under the surface. So I will pose more questions, and I'm not going to give all the answers tonight, so some of those are going to come from you. But I want you to think about these questions as I'm posing them about the evolution of helpful and harmful behaviors. How do community values come about? Where do these values even come from? From the many values we all have, how does a community decide which values to adopt or establish? And how do we enforce community values? What different values are at play in our communities, both positive and negative, that we see now? And are some values neutral? And what role do we play in passing along our community values to others? In our community, how do our values affect our everyday choices in small and big ways? And the key concepts that I want you to think about are that every community does have values. We establish our values by how we live, how we interact with each other. And these values are positive and some are not so positive. Now, I'll tell you a little bit about the value maybe of being a nosy neighbor. How many people think the value of being a nosy neighbor is good or bad? And I'll just let you think about that. You don't have to put that in the chat, but just think about that for a moment. Is having a nosy neighbor a good or bad value, or a not so good value? So, you know, the answer really is it might depend. It might be really helpful to have a nosy neighbor. If someone was breaking into your house, that neighbor might be able to phone the police or intervene in a situation where you're being, you know, broken into. But on the other hand, if somebody's always looking over and looking in your house, you might feel a little awkward as well. So you can see community values and establishing community values and the norms in community are different for everyone. There's really no rule book for communities, and establishing relationships of trust is really the most important thing. Watching out for each other is really important, and helping behavior is often what we expect, and harming behavior is not what we expect. So I want to talk a little bit about value. And we'll get into an exercise about community values, but a value just simply defined as something that you consider important and worthwhile. So it's something you want to invest in, you want to invest time in. And we'll talk a little bit about this. When you think about the community, we all, even on Zoom in the last number of months, have lived very fast-paced lives. In some ways, it's sped up. We may even have a little less time because of the meetings go back to back, and we're quite busy. And we don't always notice what's going on around us. And Julie mentioned cyberbullying or even Zoom conversations that can go in a way that people may be feeling even fatigued and tired, and may say or do things that may cause harm. So there are two things to consider. What does it mean to be an active bystander and live into a set of values and increase those values? And then the other question I'll just pose is, what is our role in supporting and encouraging positive values? If we don't do that, then who does? So the next thing I'd like you to do, we're going to try a little exercise, and I'm just going to stop share for a minute, and I'm going to put in the chat a link. Now, hopefully, you can see this link in the chats come up. If you don't see the chat, there's a toolbar along the bottom of your screen, and you can see chat, and there's probably a little 4 in it right now. If you click on this link, it'll take you to something called a Padlet, and I will click on it, and I'm going to do a new share, and I'm just going to show you what it looks like, and you can click on the link at the same time as well. And so I'll explain what we're going to do. There it is. So in the bottom right-hand corner, down on the very bottom side of the screen, is a little plus sign. So if you click on that plus sign, what you can do is you can write something. So you can write what your community value is. And so you can start to populate this right now. So I'm going to write caring for others. And I can post that. And then someone else, you can just start writing those in if you want to do that, and just take a minute. Just click on the Padlet in the chat and start adding others if you can. Oh, great, they're coming in. All right. So there's quite a few. I'll just give people another minute or so. So this is great. There's quite a few values that you can see a lot of commonalities. So there's things like joy and sharing and generosity, help, checking in, being present, respect for common spaces, protection, hospital, inclusiveness, help, respect, civility, collaboration, listening, understanding, belonging, offering assistance, respecting one another's, caring for the environment, togetherness. Looks like empathy is coming on there now. Honesty, that's excellent. So there, as you can see, there are just many values that we all want to see and want to bring into our community. And I'll give you an opportunity now to talk in small breakout groups about community values. And this is an opportunity to really connect on what you think generates these types of community values and how we can promote them as active bystanders within the community. This is a Wordle. Some of you may have seen Wordles before. It's just another way of putting together community values, and I wanted to show you, the type of values that we often see in community are about looking after one another. Things like safety and learning and promoting beliefs and sharing and all of those types of things. So we're going to have a breakout room activity, and this will take us up into our break time. We'll do it for about 10 minutes. And I'll just explain what we'll do. There's going to be a facilitator in each of the 6 groups who can support just making sure everybody understands and knows what to do and how to manage a breakout room. You'll go into the room, but I want you to think about how we're all part of different and various communities. These might be clubs, a group, family, your town, your friends, your nation, your school, your faith, your religion, your world. It's very broad. And I want you to think about what promotes helpful behaviors in this community. And as a group, you can pick one or more of these. So it's entirely up to you depending on the time. And I want you to think about maybe just have one person jot down some notes about this so that everyone is able to sort of just think freely. Someone will jot down a few notes, and then at the end we'll do a little bit of a debrief on this. So then the second question is, what promotes harmful behaviors in this community? So on the other side of it. And then the last question is, how do helpful or harmful behaviors begin, flourish, or end, stop in this community? So those are the questions that we're gonna tackle.
Okay, I got teleported mid conversation.
Sorry about that, folks. I plucked her right out of cyberspace and into another chat.
That's okay. So I was in the group with Fawzia, and I didn't know everybody else's names. I'm sorry. Part about what promotes some of the harmful behaviors in the group were things like not speaking up, being silent, joining in when it's harmful behaviors, which just sort of escalate it and make it seem like it's okay. Another thing that can promote harmful behaviors is the lack of understanding of others and differences, and that could cause fear or misunderstanding. And then somebody was talking about the media and how the media can really sort of play up some of those differences and misrepresent groups or add to stereotyping of groups, and that can add to harmful behavior. And the idea of a lack of resources. And so when there's a competition between groups for resources, that can bring out more harmful behaviors. Is there anybody else from my group who would want to add in? So maybe go to group 2.
All right, so we'll go, well, and I realize people may not know which group number they were in, so we could have, let's say, I see Dominique on the screen. Dominique, your group, who was there and who wants to share from your group?
Sure, we were group 5, and we were small but mighty, and I was with Caitlin, Tamara, and Rabina. I was the scribe, but I just want to ask my group mates if they would like to report or if they'd like me to do that.
You can go ahead.
Thanks, Rabina. So we had a really interesting discussion about the groups that we belong to, and Tamara really talked about how COVID has shrunk her world in that respect, and that a lot of the groups that we used to identify with, or you'd go to a church on Sunday, or you would go out dancing with people, or you would go out bowling, or all of those have shifted with COVID, and that's really challenging. And we've talked also about sometimes you're in a group, but you don't identify necessarily with everybody in that group. And so it's really important to be holding values of empathy and patience and transparency and authenticity. So we talked about, to promote a healthy community, you have to have your own personal confidence and feel safe enough to do that and confident enough to uphold those values. The environment has to be safe as well. And so we don't always necessarily feel safe in that environment. So the security, personal security and safety was a really key factor. And we talked about what promotes healthy behaviors are really one-on-one conversations, more understanding, some clarity around expectations or rules, and also that nothing is against you, but it's rather for all of us. And aligning those conversations with values was really important. So we talked about being non-judgmental, acknowledging and greeting people, and that the habit of smiling at people and saying good morning is important in our immediate sort of neighbor communities. And that really harmful is othering or judging or being closed-minded. And probably a lot of the root of that was not a lot of communication or not understanding the others, making assumptions. We talked a bit about body language that's closed and hostile, gossip that could be really negative. And that was it. I wonder if my group mates had anything else to add.
You did a good job there, Dominique. Thanks for doing that.
No problem.
All right. Thank you, Dominique. Yeah, a nice, some really, both groups had really, it sounds like really good discussions about, especially during COVID, the impact too that we're seeing. How about Amy's group?
Sure, yeah. We were group number 4, and we were with Richard, Chong, Alejandra, and Kim, and myself. So at the beginning, I had kind of asked what communities everyone is a part of to kind of get a feel of who everyone is. And I think we all agreed that that's not actually an easy question to answer right now, kind of because of COVID. I think we're kind of feeling disjointed in our communities. And yeah, it's just not as simple of a question right now to answer. And during this time, we're being encouraged to reach out and get involved and support each other. But it's kind of confusing how to do that safely and what to do and who needs support. And we even mentioned in the current political climate how it's very divisive, and you almost need to pick a side, but then once you pick a side, it becomes more complicated. So yeah, just about the complications of getting involved these days. And then about some helpful and harmful behaviors. I think we were also talking about how that can be dependent on the situation and dependent on the group. So maybe for someone, something could be harmful, but you don't want to kind of step on anyone's toes or assume something. So you kind of silence yourself in order to kind of continue the solidarity. And how we also have to kind of save face. So again, we're being encouraged to ask for help, but that's just it. You have to be brave enough to kind of ask for help. So again, is it helpful or hurtful to be told to ask for help? Because then you kind of have to make yourself vulnerable, even though it may seem like a good thing to be asking people for help. And even in today's climate, kind of asking friends for help can be a little bit scary because again, you're making yourself vulnerable. And then we also had another conversation about the slogan, we're all in this together, and that can how that can actually mask inequalities, since we're all different and we're all in different positions in the society, and we may not all be doing well, and we may not actually all be in this together. I think that covers everything. If anyone else wanted to add something.
All right, thanks, Amy. Thanks also, the interesting thing is you're right, our communities have shrunk and changed, and that's a good acknowledgement of how things have changed. So we've had Amy, Julie, Deb. Did we have Deb already? No. Your group, Deb?
I will unmute myself. Does anybody from my group want to share anything? I did take a couple of notes, but I had Sigrid, Krista, Naomi, and Judy in my group. I will jump in with my notes, and the group can certainly add. So definitely had a good conversation. So around some of the behaviors, and so I'm looking at my other screen over here where my notes are. So there was discussion that in our country we feel that at times we're more fortunate than other countries when it comes to a feeling of helpfulness in the community. So there's definitely room to grow, but in our country we do have a little bit of a more helpful attitude in general. talked a lot about this attitude and this orientation developing as a young child. So positive values start when you're young, which leads to personal examples. People, if they have personal examples of people that they can follow and learn those kind of attitudes. Leadership also can play a big role in promoting kind of helpful behaviors in the community. Community engagement. So the more engaged you are, the more likely you are to look out for others and be concerned. And as well, just exposing yourself to different opinions. So the more you want to learn, the more you're open-minded and active listening, and just openly kind of learning about other people's experiences and learning about differences and similarities, the more likely you are to have helpful behaviors in your community. Some of the, and then the other piece there was being willing to speak up. So people who are willing to speak up, of course, will lead to a more helpful, and within your own family, within your community. We talked a lot about how you speak up, and that sometimes, you know, trying to control your emotions, I think that can be really hard, but trying to control your emotions to not get into confrontations and not escalate kind of situations. So we did kind of spill that over to what's harmful, which could be, you know, getting emotional and people, which is hard when people feel really passionate about these subjects. So there was a discussion around how sometimes that can be harmful when people's feelings are high in a lot of these. And certainly harmful is, you know, when you have this attitude of only looking out for yourself and an attitude of me first and what's in it for me. So those clearly wouldn't be, would be more harmful. And then of course the discussion about the online world and how it's a lot easier online to have harmful behaviors than it is in person. An interesting reflection that I had is, you know, one of the benefits of the online world is these online communities and support groups. So one form of community is you can reach broader audiences by joining online support groups, but even within those online support groups, there can be harmful behaviors. So it's not always a safe place. So something that's meant to be helpful is potentially not as helpful. So kind of reiterating when we talked about how those helpful behaviors or harmful behaviors begin, flourish, or stop. So definitely, as others have said, so books and media, so portrayal in books, portrayals in media can definitely color people's perspectives. An interesting point about inaccurate depictions of history. So if we don't have good, accurate view of historical events, then we can also have a lack of compassion for what's happened. So that was, I think, a really interesting point as well. Events like this can help stop harmful behaviors, was an example of having these kind of discussions and having these kind of conversations. And again, back to some of the points that we'd had earlier, is teaching children from a young age. So again, talking about respect and building those values from a younger age. Somebody else touched on having a strong sense of confidence in self. So we also had a discussion about that. So the ability to have a sense of introspection and being able to be aware. So what is that sense of self? Being aware of yourself, being aware of your own feelings and your own behaviors, and then how you can change your own behaviors is obviously also going to be kind of a way to help that. So those were the main points that I had, some definite similarities to some of the other groups. Did anybody from the group have anything you wanted to add to that?
I like that when you said that the early years laid the ground for personality and values. Like the early years, like when you put those values on children from younger age, really this is very unique way to plant those stuff. So I wish in my country they started this way, not in when they becoming elder, to start doing these values. And also in my country, I have a differences and similar. Like I noticed that here in Canada, like my kids in the school, like there is no more involvement with adult stuff here. The children, they're not involved with adults. Like in my country, the children involved a lot with adults. So that's why they pick up a lot of conversation that is not in their age. And here the children, they are not involved with adults a lot. So I like the way that you said, yeah, from early years, we have to change their behaviors because they can't forget about what they learned when they was young. We're young. Thank you.
Thank you, Maha, and thank you, Deb. Lots of rich takeaways there. We could certainly unpack that for quite some time and appreciate that. I was thinking about being, we have to be willing, and how we do it is important. Really took away that as I was thinking about in being an active bystander. It also means understanding that we might be the harm doer at some point, and how today's harm doer could be tomorrow's active bystander. We interchange these roles in community depending on certain situations, and so I like Dr. Bonnie Henry's little slogan: "Be calm, be kind, be safe." It's those little things really do help. All right, so Mariana and Richard, were you in the same group? Mariana, Richard?
Actually, Richard and I were not in the same group.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mariana, do you want to?
Yeah, I was in the group with Dave and I believe Claire, and I'm going to say Nancy. I'm hoping that that's correct.
Okay.
And I'm going to let Dave take the lead if Claire and Nancy are okay with that, and then we could add comments after he's shared.
Yeah, our group, we were the group that had Julie until she was teleported someplace else in space and time. So some of the observations that were made in our group in terms of promoting helpful behavior is being intentional, having deliberate conversations about things, and know what we want to see happen, know what you want to see. And along that journey, being self-reflective, checking in with yourself along the way. We also talked about starting early with children and instilling those values, leading by example. If we put it out there and we're doing it ourselves, others hopefully will follow. Rather than being preoccupied by the extrinsic value of doing something helpful, let it be intrinsic. It not only is it more genuine, but it's not for recognition. It's for the right reasons. When it came to actually, I'll stop there to see if my group has anything else to add to the helpful portion of the conversation. Mariana?
I was just going to say that I'm right on board with that. The intention needs to be pure and not self-motivated.
And then Claire and Nancy, was there anything else?
No, I think you did a fine job. I didn't realize we had such a good discussion.
In terms of harmful, well, we did. We absolutely did.
Yeah, we did.
In terms of harmful, it's getting out of those negative. It's so easy to get caught up in the negative mindsets. Now, one of the things that we observed, things like social media really feed into that, and feed into that overwhelming feeling that things can't change, and leading to closed-mindedness. So being more open-minded, but closed-mindedness leads to the harm. Not being informed and being ignorant and speculating rather than going on evidence. And that's something that we also observed, is making sure that we're asking for the evidence, and making sure that the information that we're getting is appropriate information. So I think that goes along with what Deb was saying too. Not being curious and speculating as to why something is, rather than asking questions. And being self-centered lead to the harmful behavior. So I'll turn to my group again and make sure that I covered everything.
Anybody else? Claire?
You're doing great. Yep, I think it's great.
I was just going to say, sometimes we really don't take the time to listen. Like we nod and we look at people, but we actually don't take in what they're saying to us, and you know, and responding in a way that's appropriate.
That's a very good point. And then in terms of the third question, how do they begin, how do they flourish? And from the helpful behavior, having positive conversations, being curious, being persistent. And by that it was meant, you know, when something doesn't succeed, to keep trying and having true conviction in what you are doing and why you're doing it. Reevaluating along the way. Question actions more often. And then in terms of harmful, we were a little pressed for time, but one of the things that was observed is some of the harmful behavior seems to flourish a lot of times because improper attention is paid to it. So, you know, an example would be it's chasing down the rabbit hole. Things that giving it validation by listening to it and responding to it, rather than sometimes maybe just dismissing it and not feeding it. Sometimes I think when we do that, we're actually making it much, much worse. And again, I'll turn to my group to see if there was anything that I missed there.
Claire, Nancy, or?
No, I think that's good. One of the examples that comes to mind quite strongly to me of the last point was when you have a major crime that's been done. Nowadays, they don't publish much about the person, excuse me, that committed the crime, but focus more on the people that were harmed. And I think I really respect that, rather than give all the attention to the person that committed the atrocity. That would be an example of paying attention where the attention should be.
Excellent.
I was thinking more about Twitter, how things can get so unraveled on Twitter when there's a particular issue, and the negativity that happens on Twitter is sort of is one of those things that's very harmful.
Yeah, definitely social media is much harder to control, and finding ways to create positive influence in social media is, I think, a special skill, because often the negativity, you know, outweighs the positivity online. So yeah, I think we could do a whole other workshop just on that, a whole other course, I think. But well said. And David, thank you for sharing those points. And thank you for all the conversations. We didn't miss a group, right? We covered everybody. Is there anyone left out? I think we got everybody. So now what I want to do is shift a little bit and read a story and just have you think about what you would do as an active bystander. You know, we're in a time and a place with COVID where, you know, we're not always sure what we should do or if things are going on in our community around us. And sometimes, you know, the evolution of helpful or harmful behaviors, we're not always sure when we should intervene. Should we do it sooner? Should we do it later? Should we make sure? And so this little story, I just want you to think a little bit as I read it, and then I'll stop at points and then just maybe ask for brief comments at different points from those that want to share. And you can just unmute and share a comment. about what you're thinking. So I'll start with, this is a true story written by a tab trainer in her own words. My friend and I pulled into a parking lot and parked our car. We were in the middle of an important conversation, so we sat in our car for a few minutes to finish what we were talking about. As we were getting ready to get out of the car, we noticed a few rows over a couple, a man and a woman in their 20s, arguing in their car. So the question that my tab trainer friend was asking herself was, well, how did I know they were arguing? Did I think intervention was needed? What was inhibiting or promoting me to act? So I'll just pause for a second. What would you, if you're a bystander in that situation, what's something that you might start to think about? What would be on your mind? You can type in the chat as well, if that works. Or you can certainly just unmute and share what you would be thinking at that point. So I'll continue on. The next thing we observed was a man getting out of the car and starting to walk in the opposite direction of the store toward the road. What was going on there? Why did I think he was walking away? What was going on for him? How do you think the woman was feeling? Again, I'll just pause, get you to think about that. You can certainly type in the chat, or start to think about what would you be doing in that situation. Now, as the man continued to walk away, the woman started honking the horn and looking back and honking, looking back and honking. Why might she be honking? What was she thinking? What was she feeling? What was he thinking? How was he feeling? Do any of you think intervention is needed? Caitlin, or from Dominique, I'm just seeing a message there. I would be closely watching. Maybe he's just trying to cool off. She might be signaling for help. Great, all right. So you're starting to think like a bystander. So the man started walking back toward the car. When he arrived at the car, the woman was yelling and screaming at him through the window. When the man went to open the car door, it was locked. What was going on there? Why do you think she locked the doors? Do you think that intervention is needed now? I would just keep observing. I would watch their body language. I'll try to tap into intuition. I'll also ask myself. Yeah, number 3, it doesn't hurt to ask, are you okay? All right, locked doors at least ensure safety. So now it continues on. The woman continued to yell. After 5 or 6 attempts to get into the car, the man got angry and started to walk away again. It was at this point the woman finally opened her car door. We watched the man lunge at the woman, his hand moving toward her face. What's going on here? What do you think they're both thinking? What do you think they're feeling? Do you think intervention is needed? What would you do? Yeah, so we got, yes, I would let them know I was paying attention. Certainly Deb says fear, definitely. When we saw this, my friend and I both jumped out of the car. An abrupt motion caught their attention of both the man and the woman. They both seemed embarrassed. She handed him the car keys and they drove off. Makes you pause, makes you think, doesn't it? So she says, I will never know what happened to those two that day. Maybe this was the first time they got into such a bad fight. Maybe they broke up. Maybe they started counseling. But I'm left with the worry of knowing maybe they drove off to a more private place or went home and the violence escalated. Knowing what I know now about active bystandership, I wish I would have interrupted sooner. So what could I have done before I got to the point of physical violence? And Deb says, take down the license plate. Are there other ideas you have in those situations?
I like the idea that I saw in the chat, and I think and I've done this in other situations. When I see stuff like that happening, is just get up, get out of my car, be near, be visible. So that comment about let them know somebody's watching, especially early on in the interaction when you're, if you're not really sure what's happening, it's just be visible and make it clear that somebody's watching this and it's not happening kind of privately.
Yes, thank you, Deb. Yeah, I think that's really, really vital, is to be there. We've got a few other chats. Walk to the guy when he's walking away and ask if you can help. Yeah, I really like the comment about sharing. I'm watching. Yeah, yeah, even saying I'm watching. Is everything okay? Those are all good. So being a bystander is really being able to observe and get a sense of what's happening. Are there sounds of distress? Do people need help? Maybe a group is gathered. Maybe someone's crying, or there are loud, angry voices. Maybe it's unnaturally silent. Look for all these things to see how you might need to stay close, stay nearby, be attentive. Recruit an ally. Ask somebody to see if they think this seems unusual as well. What do they think? Maybe together with someone else, make a plan, offer some help, ask them if they can do anything for them. Support the target as much as you can and see if they want to talk to you. So these are all different things that we could do in these types of situations. So in thinking about the evolution of helpful and harmful behaviors, you know, when a person harms another, they change. And when a person helps another, they change. Harm doers must justify and defend their acts to themselves and to others. One way they do that is to devalue, to find blame, or to find fault with the target. When harm doers think that harm doing is reasonable and even necessary, they will feel more comfortable harming the same person again. And it becomes easier for them to harm one person, and it becomes easier for them to harm others. And when bystanders remain passive in the face of harm doing, they distance themselves from the targets. When a person helps another, they value the well-being of that person. They also feel more competent to be able to be a helper and see themselves as a good person who will help others. What is considered normal, accepted, and valued in a community can change in the same way. When people harm others without negative consequences, harming others becomes more acceptable because people don't see the harm doer as negative, as acting negatively. More people helping others and being active bystanders in the community helps it become normal, common, and valued. Bystanders acts that stop harm doing to individual targets also stop the changes in a community that encourage harm to others. Active bystanders help develop positive attitudes, behaviors, and values in the whole community. And this takes moral courage. And this is something that moral courage is really about doing things that you feel are right, even though others might disapprove at the time, or you might be embarrassed, or may go against what you think might be normal, to just walk the other way. So in the remaining time that we have, I want to do one last exercise. And this exercise, normally when I would lead a circle, I would do it, and I would use a talking piece, and I would explain that that circles have been used, and people have met together in circles for millennia, and they've met and around campfires and around just different ways in community to connect. And in a circle process, we would have each of you hold a talking piece and share. We're not going to be able to do that. Today, what I'd like you to do, and we're going to do this, is what I would like to do is share in the chat one value that's important to you right now as you spend time just in this closing exercise. I'll start with a value of, I'll say hope. but others of you may have a value that you would like to share. We'll just let the chat fill up. I won't read them. And sorry, Maha, I see that you're not feeling well, so hopefully you're okay. So typically in a circle process, we would use these values to guide our conversation. And for this process, the second question I want to ask is, without digging too deep, I don't want people to go too deep into thought on this question, but think of a time when you felt harmed. Maybe somebody said or did something that didn't feel good to you. Again, don't dig too deep. Just think about maybe somebody make a comment or something that didn't sit well. In the chat, put and typically what I would do is I would have everyone write on a card, and I would write say the feeling somebody did. I would feel, maybe I would feel angry. So, and then I would hold this up to the group and I would put it in the center of the circle, and this is how we would do a circle. But in this situation, think about a time somebody maybe said or did something that didn't sit well with you, and what was the feeling that resulted, and just put it in the chat, just one word. Now I want you to think, as you're thinking about the words that you're putting in, and there's some difficult words: being demeaned, misunderstood, pain, sorrow, sadness, deflected upon. I want you to put in one word that would share with the person that you had that situation happen to. What was your need? And I'll just type that in. What was your need? What did you need at the time? One word. So maybe you needed understanding. You might need it to be heard or to stop. Needed to be valued, empathy. Excellent. Thank you everyone for sharing. Now, I want you to think about a time now where you harmed someone yourself. Maybe you said or did something to hurt someone. It didn't feel good to you maybe at the time, but you said it and it was out there. I want you to write, what was your feeling at this time when you hurt someone? What did you feel? One word. Thank you, everyone. Now I want you to think about, what did you need at that time? What did you need the most? And what did you need the other person to know? What's one word that you can share? All right, thank you, everyone. I can see there's some really powerful words in that exercise that you've brought forward. I'll just stop share for a moment. The question that I'll pose now is, what does it mean to live in community where these things happen and how we can address the needs of all of us? There are times where we're harmed, and there are times where we harm others. And this is a particular challenge when you see the feelings that we have and the needs that we have when we are harmed are often interconnected with the feelings and needs of those who have harmed as well. Sometimes they're opposites. Sometimes when we've been harmed, we need time. And when we harm someone else, we want to clear it up and we need forgiveness. And so sometimes these things come into tension as we think about harm doing in community. So I'll type that question and give you a moment. If anyone wants to unmute and share, but you can also type it in the chat as well. So the question is, what does it mean to live in community where these things happen? Yeah, I like that, Dominique. Understand the needs of others and articulate our own. Excellent. Part of nonviolent communication is, if you can take one thing away from this evening, is understanding what is it you're feeling and what is it you need, and asking the other person that as well when you're in a situation of conflict. It seems quite simple, but it's quite profound when we actually ask someone what they need when they're frustrated or angry, or when they've even harmed us. What do they need? Maybe they would say, I actually need to apologize, or I need forgiveness. Some of you said. Dominique says, grace, the benefit of the doubt. It means we're all human, and hopefully we can grow from our mistakes. Yeah, recognize mutual vulnerability. There's some great, require space. Community becomes gentler. Some excellent comments, everyone. To open our own humanity and the humanity of others, an opportunity to understand harm and make things right. All right, well, I'm going to draw things to a close. I know Julie needs a few minutes yet, and I will just, I'm going to slide share just the final slide or two. If you're interested in more active bystander training, we do have 2 workshops coming up, and we can email this out to you. Julie can do that, and there's some posters I've sent to Julie. Training Active Bystanders is a partnership between 6 organizations. I oversee that, Community Justice Initiatives, Carizon Family and Community Services, the Ripple Effect, Unity Kitchener, the Coalition of Muslim Women, and MCC. And this was all made possible a year ago with a grant from the Kitchener Community Foundation, so that we could do community training and Training Active Bystanders, which is a 2.5-hour workshop that this wasn't that workshop, but there's a workshop that you can take. And I will just close with this poem. It's by Lila Watson. And she says, if you've come here to help me, you're wasting your time. Because if you've come because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together. If you've come here to blame others, you're wasting your time. But if you've come because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together. If you've come here in defense of yourself, you're wasting your time. But if you've come because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together. And I hope you enjoyed this evening. Thank you, and I'll turn it back over to Julie.
Thanks, Rod. Somebody asked if we could include the case study story as well. So I wondered if it would be okay for with you if we include that with the evaluation email that will be sent out.
Oh, sure,
tomorrow.
Yep.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, all right. So thanks everybody for your participation. It was really wonderful. I've never done breakout groups before, so that was my first foray into it. And I thought the conversation sounded like they went really, really well. Yeah, just everybody participated really great. And as mentioned, the Porch Chats are part of a series of chats related to Keep Families Safe campaign. To find out more about Keep Families Safe, please check out our website. preventioncrime.ca. There's a tab for Keep Families Safe. That's got all sorts of wonderful information on there. For future Porch Chats, so we are planning 3 more Porch Chats. So normally we have 2 or 3 Porch Chats in a summertime, and they're very weather dependent, but we're not now bound by weather now that we're doing things more virtually. So we're actually planning some Porch Chats that will be happening the end of November and into December. And these Porch Chats are going to be very different for us in that they are going to be offered in other languages. So we are having a Porch Chat. They'll all be focusing on family violence and some on abuse of children. And we will be having one in Arabic, one in Turkish, and one in Kurdish. So we will be posting that on our website, but it'll also be in our social media, and we're going to be relying on our coalition partners to get that information out to communities who will find those helpful. We're also planning an event actually with Mennonite Central Committee as well as the Domestic Assault Response team that is working with Theatre of the Beat, a theater company, to do a forum theater project called Missed Opportunities. And it will be also about domestic violence. And there will be an opportunity for the audience to be involved in changing the story. So very along the lines of being an active bystander, of when can you intervene, how can you intervene, and what is the outcome of those interventions. And really the campaign that we are running is really about speaking to community, to friends, to families, to neighbors, to employers, and colleagues about how we can all play a role in reducing and preventing family violence. So again, go on to our website, become a friend of crime prevention. So again, on our website, you can become a friend of crime prevention. That's an awesome way to find out about the work we're doing at Crime Prevention Council, a lot of the awesome work that's happening in the community, and you'll find out about all the events that we're running as well. So thank you very much. It is 9 o'clock, like on the dot. How perfectly timed. So everybody, thank you very much for your participation and have a great rest of the evening.